I think that most of us are inherently kind. I think we want to be better people. The inherent human nature is to look at someone who needs our help and say, why can't I help?
Hello everyone, my name is Pranav Kothari. I'm the CEO of Educational Initiatives. Our vision is to see a world where children are learning with understanding, and we make student assessments and an adaptive learning software called MindSpark for the same. EI Dialogues is our endeavor to bring in-depth conversations with education sector leaders who have made difficult choices, who have grown organizations, who have impacted a lot of beneficiaries on the ground, to understand the what, why, when, where, and the difficult things that they had to do in their journey. I hope you enjoyed the detail in the conversation, something that I feel is rarely available on social media. Today I'm thrilled to have Puja Marwaha, who's the CEO of Child Rights and You, or CRY, as we all know it. I'm curious to know about her journey in the sector. She's been there for 13 years as the CEO. And would love to understand the transformation, the organization, the scale that she has built to tap into a large retail funding network and how she's managed to put all of this together. Puja, welcome to EI Dialogues. It's such a pleasure having you here. Thank you for coming to the show.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very honored.
Which I remember, as a child, I was going door to door selling cards. The cards were beautiful, they were pretty. It gave a very shy kid like me an opportunity to talk to strangers. I think just the fact of doing something at an early age has left indelible impressions. You've turned 40 years as an organization. I'd love to hear how have you changed during these 4 decades, and how do you keep it alive? Could you shed some light on that?
Yeah, sure. I think this is something that I'm always immensely proud of. As in 1979, when our founder, Ripon, was very fond of saying he was an airline purser, means all I'm qualified to do is serve tea and coffee. And his idea was that we start an organization that is India's children, that it gets Indians to take responsibility for Indian children. And to do this, he did 2 things right from the beginning, which always amazes me. Because, normally the thought would be, let's start a school or let's start a class. But no, Ripon didn't do that. He said, I know that there are privileged Indians who can actually give. Even in 1979, when economically, India was considered a basket case. And there are organizations, individuals and NGOs that do great work but don't know how to access the funds. So he called us CRY, Child Relief and You, where he saw the organization as the and. And he realized what is the best way to start. How do you get people to trust you or know you? And that was cards. So his idea was to start making and selling cards. And that's what we did for the first 20 years. But 20 years down the line, it stopped becoming profitable. And I think the question we had to ask ourselves is, we are here for children, not to run a cards business. And therefore, we actually outsourced it. We got into a partnership with Archie's, and we then started focusing on getting Indian individuals to give money. And this became what today is now called the retail giving segment. But the real thrill of it for us, I think, is that if you look at this throughout these 40 years, it has always been about adult Indians, Indian citizens, kind of taking responsibility. Both in starting an NGO and doing the work, or trying a new experiment, or whether it was to just get up and write a check or volunteer. When that was, like you said, as a young boy, you were given an opportunity to do something that was outside of yourself.
And what motivates young adults to take responsibility? Like, why would they go out of their comfort zone? What, from a psychological or biological perspective, have you found as the reasons people engage?
I think that most of us are inherently kind. I think we want to be better people. And so I find even when a lot of people say, oh, young people come in to volunteer nowadays because they want an internship on their resume. But I find even if they did come in with that motivation, finally, no, they are so inspired by the children. And I think it is, if you ask me, I think most of us look at the inherent human nature is to look at someone who needs our help and say, why can't I help? And the challenge always for organizations like ours is for us, A, to acknowledge that inherent potential in every person, and B, to find many different ways for them to fulfill that potential. Because, people come and say, I know I came to CRY and I said, I'm an MBA, I've done HR, I know you can't really use me. And they said, no, you are HR, we don't have an HR function. Can you set it up for us? So to find that and constantly give out to the world for a volunteer who may be a design professional, who may be a filmmaker. For 40 years ago, Anjali Ila Menon, who only knew how to paint and said, Ripana, I can't help. He said, give me your painting and I'll turn it into a card. So it gave that unique look also to the Indian cards. Because every step of it was people meeting their potential to give and to do.
And what, allows people to continue the kindness that they were born with, and what hinders them? Like, would you say on average as adults are less kinder than children? And if yes, why? What are the nurturing environments to foster the kindness, and what are, reasons why it naturally wanes away?
So you're so right. That's so interesting when you say children are so naturally kind. We have found in our work, right from the beginning, another thing that Ripon had learned to, he started giving when he was a very young boy. He started questioning why the children in front of his building didn't have as much as him. So he would do, friends of his tell us stories about how he would get them all to collect the milk packets from their house. And in those days in Bombay, you could sell those milk packets and then use it to buy a firecrackers and food, right? So what we have found through our journey is that children, you're right. I mean, there'll be a kid from grade 6, who will come to us and say, I had collected this money for my birthday, but I've decided to give it for children. Yeah. So there is that. But what stops you? I think as you get older, there is a cynicism that sets in, or a hopelessness. To me, the larger cynicism can be dealt with. As in, yes, there is bad in the world, but there is also a lot of good in the world. But the really debilitating thing, I think, is helplessness. Sometimes in India, the numbers, we have 330 million children. Of those, still, you know better than me, still there's such a large percentage that doesn't have access to school, for example. And people look at this and say, oh my God, what's my 10 rupees going to do? Or what's my little contribution going to do? Let's give up. So CRY's model, for example, is to try and get money from, I would say, broadly 100,000 people every year.
Wow.
Average donation size only 3,000 rupees.
Okay.
Your money goes in, and all that money makes a big difference. So, just pick up that pen and write that check. That little act is also more than you would do otherwise. So I think because of that, we also realize that what we have to communicate is hope to people. And all our brand work, our what we put out there in the world about Cry is always that children can be helped. Children are amazing, actually. You can give them very little and they will take it and run with it.
Yeah. Tell me more about why people give, because I think it's so easy to fall into, hey, this is my income, I have rent, I have food, I want to save for the future, I might be starting a family, I want to buy a car, I want to upgrade my AC. Like, why would someone sort of give money away at the cost of personal upgrade, of comfort and luxury?
So, one, I think, is to not make it that difficult. So I have realized that offering, or we've realized at Cry, that offering many price points, to use business language, is actually something that you must do. So that a person who's giving, in fact, we're right now starting a campaign which we're calling Das Ka Dam, which is you give 10 rupees every month and that's all. We will do something with your money. Yeah? So make it easy for people to give. One, as an amount. B, as a reach. You have to reach out to people and be there when the thought strikes them. The thought may not strike them all the time. And I know a lot of people have asked me this question saying that, oh, but you know, I'm not yet ready to give. I'm not yet rich. Yeah. And you say you don't have to be rich. There is, some of our most treasured donors are, I remember this little old lady, she died 10 years ago, sadly enough. She passed away. But she would come every year. And she had started giving when in Cry the cost per child of education was only 240 rupees. So she still had only 240 to give. But she would come to the Bombay office, she would take a train, she would walk so that she could save the cost of that taxi. And she would come to office and give us that 240 rupees every day. And to me, that's what it is, right? For people to take out from everything else that they could have done, but say, I want to do this. In fact, I find people get so creative. Like someone, I remember Subhash Kamath, he used to be then, he's an advertising guy, came up with this idea of saying, you know, I anyway spend this money on return gifts for my kid's birthday. Can I give donations and can you give me something that I can give each child, saying you've donated? I think as a nation also, it's a challenge for us to ensure that we make giving an inherent part of what we do. Even if I earn $100, I'll give one. If I am earning, of course, a lot, then I can give a lot.
And we celebrate this joy of giving
celebrate
week, right? Yeah, okay.
Each one, right? And many young people come and say, I can't give you, but can I volunteer? I have time, you know? And I've often been told by people, why do you maintain, you know, this is a cost for Cry, right? Yeah. And yes, it's a cost, but it's mission driven.
Yes.
I want to give young people the opportunity to do myriad things, and you really never know what happens with it tomorrow. Huh? Yeah. I have so many volunteers who started their own organizations.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're always beaming proudly when, you know, we know that this person had volunteered with us so many years ago and is now running their own organization. Amazing.
But sometimes volunteers can be a pain, right? They may not sort of be regular, they may not adhere to their promise, not do what the application said they wanted to do, and just the sheer cost of managerial bandwidth that you would have to put. How many volunteers do you have?
We have 4,000 to 5,000 regular volunteers, which we call, you get called regular only if you've got a certain amount of time that you've given, right? A certain amount. And some people stick for years.
Yeah.
Many people don't.
And what's the reason people would want to volunteer?
Oh, it's so interesting. We do a study every year where we're asking volunteers what are they getting. And so many are talking about building leadership skills. They're talking about this gave me a glimpse into a world that I didn't know existed. I built very selfishly, I built my own, one young girl once said to me, I want to be an event manager and here I have to manage so many events that I'm getting the best practice ever. So sometimes it's as, you know, personal as that, and sometimes it is about, okay, I mean, I did this, and Like one child who after 1 year wrote, "My money is my money, damn the poor." You know, so you lose some. Yeah, so I think being in this work, you're right. I mean, you see mostly the best of people, which I think is an amazing high. We do a lot of capacity building. So there is a lot of orientation, there's a lot of attempt to give back, of saying, how do I bring up your knowledge? For example, the importance of not deserting children. If you've committed to teach children, then you don't walk away from them. You don't decide you had a family get together and you don't come. Yeah, the impact that it has on children. So you spend a lot of time doing that, and I'll be honest with you, I mean, for these 5,000, there will probably be another 20,000 who will have slipped through the cracks. You know, so
yeah,
you do get attrition, and everybody doesn't sort of roll up, but some do. And sometimes it's quite strange. It's even, this is one of the things I learned in CRI. I was very humbled by it, I must say, is that sometimes people spend very little time with us as an employee or as a volunteer, but sometimes they leave behind some very precious things.
Yeah, for example.
Just the thing they did. I remember we had one guy who just happened, at that time we were going to do India's first telethon. So we had to create content, and this chap just happened to have a contact in the music industry. He stayed with us for just 5 months. But we managed to get a most beautiful song put together by the music director was a chap called Adesh Srivastava. And he then went off and got Javed Bhai to write a song, you know, he got singers. It was an amazing thing to watch. And I'm saying, here is a person who was hardly here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yet left us this. So, I mean, I also have to rethink my impressions about people who, you know, Aaya Ram, Gaya Ram, oh, they came and they went.
Puja, tell us a little bit about the CRI model. Like, how do you fundraise? Where do you deploy those funds? If we can get to hear that.
So, I'll quickly walk you through fundraising. As I said, the mission of CRI made us think about who did we want to raise money from and how did we want to raise that money. And that answer clearly took us towards getting more and more people to give money. And as I said, offering them different options that they could give a little bit or they could give a lot. And how do you then, so then the question became, how do you manage that, right? As an organization, there is a construct of how are you going to manage these people. You're going to have the software. So we made the first donor management software in 1994-95. We developed the first donor management software so that we learned how to do direct mail from some Swedish agencies, and learning to run I call it a factory. You know, it's not a joke. Running retail, we have now a combined database from these 20 years of fundraising. You can imagine of 20 to 25,000 people. Which data do you keep? The art of data management, segregation. It is an entire specialization in itself.
So there's 2.5 million people on your database.
On the database.
Who have at some point given to CRI.
Absolutely. But and these are the ones we've kept on database because our software now goes back to around 2002.
Got it.
You know, so I've not even got the ones from before that. But this is a reality, isn't? How do you use this? How do you talk to people again? How do you bring them back? Some may have stopped giving. Who has a higher propensity to give? I mean, obviously it's a science. The other thing that I want to say is that, as I said, if you pull this back to our mission and say, we need to give each entity an opportunity to give. So we realized that we had left out corporates, we had left out institutions. So we then sat on the drawing board and said, we also need to bring in as many people as possible. So today CRI has a balance of, whereas I would say in 2000, almost 90% of our funds came from selling cards. Today, it is a 50% from corporates and institutions, 50% from individuals. And a lot of this has been built on, I think, the sagacity of the original managements, people, founders who built the brand, who put out those cards, who the second professional they hired in 1989 was the communications head of the Taj, where I think not-for-profits had not even thought about these disciplines that existed in the corporate sector, right? Then, incidentally, the first person was actually Ratan Tata's ex-EA. So corporate planning, strategic planning was the first professional, so to speak, crossover to come into CRY. The second was communications, then finance, fundraising, development, and so on and so forth. So it's been a process that said we have to build that trust and credibility, so that when I have to trust you with my hard-earned money of 1,000 rupees, I know you, I trust you. So you can't just, like I say, get up in the morning and say, oh, I'm going to go and ask people for money. They need to know who you are. They need to know why you exist in this world.
Yeah. Given that you have a 50-50 on corporates and individuals, what are the pros and cons of each? Like, is one better than the other? In what regard?
Actually, in CRY, almost at a mission level, we love our individuals. Yeah. You can imagine, because it's making that mission come alive. Each person doing what they can do, giving an opportunity to the auto rickshaw wala also to give 10 bucks or whatever. But having said that, we have to be practical and hard-headed. The cost of raising individual funds, as I said, you have to maintain an operation, right? Data, call people, telecalling, it is expensive.
Transaction.
Vis-a-vis larger grants, which obviously don't require such an intensive, of course they require credibility and so on, but a lot of the work for that can be done by other functions as well, right? So CRY's finance is geared to help with larger donors, and branding is, geared to do that. So that's the main difference, I feel. Corporates has been a very interesting journey for CRY. We started in early 90s, 92, 93, our first corporate funds, where we would get them to fund the catalogs for the cards. Yeah, and we had funders, I feel, till the act came, who really wanted to give. And they would be very creative. So there was PNG who came and said, we want to use it as a sales promotion. And that was one of our first big cause-related marketing campaigns, where if they sold more because of the campaign, they would give us money. So it was a huge win-win, So there was all kinds of creative, interesting stuff that happened. I think I've seen it turn more professional after the act.
Right.
Yeah, and where now corporates are mandated to give. So sometimes it's also a little more difficult, because for too many of them it's become a, what we say, MBO. It's become a job to do. I have to now do this, I have to show compliance, my CFO is sitting on the board, and I think sometimes it's lost a little bit of its soul.
If you're comfortable sharing, how much money do you collect every year, from how many corporates and how many individuals?
So we collect around 60 to 70 crores.
Yeah.
A total. So people often tell me, you're 40 years old, you should be huge. But in CRY, I think the thing has been, we want to do it like we want to do it.
Right.
We want to have principles on how we will take the money, who we will take it from. And therefore, for example, maintain as you correctly pointed out, it's expensive to maintain a volunteering function. Yes. But we see it as something that is so inherent to our mission that we don't even think about it.
Yeah. So the 60 to 70 crores comes from about 100 corporates and 1 lakh individuals, roughly, give or take.
Roughly.
And then what do you do with this money?
So that's the second, that's the big part again. So like I said, we could have started directly our own work. But the whole thought was that what we realized was there are people and individuals sitting in places where, and this is one of my favorite quotations, I didn't make it up, someone else, an evaluator gave it to me. He said, आप वहाँ जाते हैं जहाँ धूप भी नहीं चमकती. And वहाँ पे आप कैसे, how will you find NGOs or people who can locally lead and create the work in the areas where it is required. We know that like 70% of India still lives in rural. Right? So what we do, of course, is at a thinking level, you'll find it's very strategic, right? It's very thought through. We will look at the data every 5 to 6 years. Actually 10 years, we create 10-year goal strategies and look at the geographies where we want to be, look at the communities we want to be. Where is the worst indicators for children? So whichever place they are the worst indicators for education, for protection, for health, we then go there. We try to go there. So we find, so unlike a lot of the international NGOs, we don't put out a call for applications. But what we do is actually say, I want to be in Gir forest. I know there is a community there that doesn't have access to schools or kuch nahi hai, right? So how do I go there? And then we looked for people, we couldn't find an NGO. I'm giving you that one particular example of Gir where we couldn't find an NGO. That existed already. Normally we would look for someone who's already there and who has rapport with the people.
Built the relationships.
May not be doing child-related work, but has the relationship and the equity.
Yes.
Right?
Very
Because
important.
again, I think one thing that I've learned is you have to respect the people you work for. You know, you cannot say, I will go with my wonderful ideas that I created in my Bangalore office or Bombay office and go and implement it on this guinea pig of these poor people, you know, will be thankful for anything. No, they won't. They won't let you in if they don't know you, right? But if you can't find someone, we then found a fellow. We found somebody who was willing to go in and try, knew the language, was a tribal himself. And we then gave him a fellowship. So that has been the model.
Right.
We've looked for individuals or NGOs, and many times very small NGOs, and then worked with them.
Puja, I won't ask your age. That would be quite rude. But I know your age at CRY has been 30 years, right? You spent 30 years in one organization. Why? Why have you stuck around? And more importantly, what have you discovered in 30 years that you would not have if you had spent 5 years in 6 different organizations each?
So question one once, why 30 years? Because every year I still feel like it's new. You know, there has been in these 30 years so many different things that I've learned, that I've done, that I've seen the organization do, that it just continues to inspire me every day. And that's such a, it's a trite thing to say, right? You say, of course, you're the CEO, expected to say that. But what I genuinely mean is that the person who entered in 94 is not the person I am today. And so much of it is because I met a world that I didn't know existed. I met people who, like I said, had given up everything to say, I'm going to go back and serve my community. I'm going to make sure they get the opportunities I got. Yeah, so meeting these amazing people, the sheer quality of professionals I have seen in CRY, I don't think I would have got anywhere else, you know. And I think the thing when you say, you know, what is it that I would have, in CRY I've seen great highs where we've had, the income's been coming in, everything is working tickety-boo, we have all the people in place, leadership in place. And then there have been times where you look around and you just see devastation. What you think at that time is devastation, where, for example, I can give you this example when our income from products, we realized products which were our cards, actually the investment we were putting in had outstripped the income, and we had not realized it. So we suddenly didn't have money to give. And as you know, in the laws in India, as NGOs, you cannot save a lot of money. You cannot keep working capital. What you earn is what you use in the year. And so there's been a time where that's happened. There's been a time when the internal organization has completely collapsed because we decided to try some experiment of a form of leadership. And every time I have seen, whether it was as a youngster who was reporting to the leadership or it has been as a leader, I have seen us find alternatives. I have seen us take hard decisions. I have seen people who have never said this is not possible. And somehow in the organization, the steel and the systems are there to support it. I'll give you an example of COVID. The year COVID struck us, we had a huge problem. 30 crores of our income had got knocked off. We were going to be, I know a lot of people came to me and said, maybe you're going to shut down. So my joke about it was, if we shut down, we can all go for a holiday to Maldives with our corpus and finish it off, But at that time, I knew in my heart that we will find a way. And we did. We actually discovered I think it was a period of great discovery for us, because we found out we were flexible. We found we actually had the systems to be able to do things we hadn't done for 20 years. We had not distributed food for 20 years. We had never, we never done relief work, but we did it. We could do it because we had the experience. And to me, every 5 years in CRY, I have literally seen us do this.
Yeah. So I'm always talking to people, I'm very, curious as to why people change jobs every 2 or 3 years, because I feel it's a lost opportunity to develop nuances. Like you and I can probably talk about the topics that we work on.
And we've looked at the data, there is a clear inflection point you find with people. So always see 2 years as an inflection point. There are many people who make it and many people who don't. The people who can see ahead, and it always helps people to see or meet or talk to people like me about saying, so what? I know for myself, I remember when I had my baby in around 97, 98, and if my CEO at that time had not given me flexibility and helped me rebuild my belief in myself every day, perhaps I wouldn't have survived that period, right? But I did, because that support came, and what I became because of that, I think personally, is a much better manager, much better leader, a leader who understood that even if my hours are limited, I can get so much done.
Right.
So ever since, not ever since, but even from before that, the maternity benefit policies in CRY are counterintuitive. People tell us, are you mad? People are just going to take advantage of this. And I'm like, for everyone who takes advantage, 9 will not. 9 will remember that at this time I got the flexibility, I was able to be with my child, and I was able to continue. And I am therefore able to come back and do so much more. I've in fact seen women who sometimes take we have a half day option till about the child is 2 years. They do so much in those 4 hours, that the other people are busy or doing other things, but they are working because they're saying, you know what, this means something to me.
Yeah. Well, Puja, you have the record on EI Dialogues to be the guest who has been the longest at any organization. Over the last 30 years, what would you say are 1 or 2 things that are counterintuitive? Like, what do you deeply believe that most people disagree with. What did you find surprising? Like if you were to take 30 years, crunch it to one or two insights, what has been the most profound yet non-intuitive learning for you?
I would say one of the biggest things that I have found has been that stability, getting people motivated truly or aligned to a purpose can happen only through a process that involves more people. Yeah. I've had, a lot of people say, how is that efficient? Yeah. How is that quick? It's not. Yeah. It takes a little more time. For example, our review process will be done at every level. Every single person is involved in the annual review. Is this a long process? Yes, probably slightly longer than other organizations. Then maybe if I had got my 5 leaders on the top to write the review, right? But the kind of ownership it produces, the kind of insights it produces, to me that is one of the greatest learnings, to have the patience and the belief in everybody's voice and everybody's agency. And it is tough to do, right? Especially when you get people from, other sectors or even other organizations who are not used to it. I think the other thing that I have learned, and I talked about that a little bit, is that you trust people with information. Yeah? Don't get caught with, this is a policy, this is a system, therefore you have to follow it. Why does that policy exist? Why is, for example, compensation the way it is? We took a call 25 years ago of saying we will live with we want an equitable system. And how do you demonstrate equity in a compensation structure? For example, we said we will evaluate all the roles in CRI, create an organization structure. But if your job got evaluated at the same level as someone else's, you will get the same salary. So it's transparent. My salary is up on the board, and so is everybody else's. Yeah. So a general manager will get the same money as another general manager. And I'm again told, no, but you should reward your fundraising people more, or you should do X, Y. And my learning has been that no, for a fundraiser to raise funds, his partnership or her partnership with the person who does the program has to be
tight.
Yeah. Right? Otherwise, this guy is going to tell him, you get paid more, you write your own reports. Isn't that what will happen and does happen? So it takes a lot of, sometimes I think, sheer stubbornness to maintain these values and to be able to help people to unpack the reasons that these so-called aberrations exist.
Noted. Thanks. Thanks, Puja, for sharing your wisdom of HR. Today in our conversation, it was great to hear about how you've built this large organization which has more than 100,000 individual donors, more than 100 corporates, how you've sort of created a more balanced fundraising mechanism with a 50-50 between corporate and individual. And then how you select partners, right, by identifying who deserves the most need, who has the connect, who has the wherewithal to be able to take this and grow. And thanks for sharing these, equitable yet counterintuitive processes of reward and recognition, of performance appraisal and management, yet to keep people at CRI. Of course, you're an epitome of being there for 30 years. I'm sure you have a tribe that's following you. I really had a good time. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you for coming on EI Dialogues.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.